ourselves to order with what we have. We're a bit short-handed today, but we'll make do. So our first item up would be approval of the agenda, which we can do without a quorum. With that though, I'm going to make the change of we'll have to just remove the item of approving minutes because that we can't do. So I would move the agenda minus the approval of last month's minutes. Any other changes? All right, so we can consider that approved then. That brings us to the public invitation portion of our meeting for interested persons to address the commission on items that weren't on our agenda for the day. Did we have anyone pre-registered to do what?
We had one email into our public information address that was regarding the Minneapolis chain of lakes, the long range plan.
And that is an item that is on our agenda.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I'll mention what that was getting at when we get to that agenda item. I'm not going to read it now, and we'll explain that later. So that then will bring us into our business items. So without a quorum, the way this will work is we can convey our feelings onto CDC via minutes, and we do have our liaison, Sue Vento, watching from home. We just won't be giving them a formal vote of recommendation. So there'll be what we talked about will be conveyed through our liaison. They just won't have an action.
You can confirm a consensus of approval.
Right, we can get to a point of saying, you know, is everyone feeling okay or not, and they'll know whether there was anything raised. So we'll start off with the Veterans Memorial Greenway Regional Trail, a Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund grant for Dakota County. Go ahead, Jessica.
Thank you, Chair and members. For the record, my name is Jessica Lee, and I'm a Parks Planner at the Council. And I'm going to present the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund for the Veterans Memorial Greenway Regional Trail, the Schiela property in Dakota County. This is business item 2024-6. The Veterans Memorial Greenway Regional Trail is located in the northern part of Dakota County and will travel 5 miles west to east from Egan to Inver Grove Heights, connecting Lebanon Hills Regional Park to the Mississippi River and the Mississippi River Regional Trail. Formerly known as the Rich Valley Greenway Regional Trail, the trail was rededicated as the Veterans Memorial Greenway Regional Trail to recognize the services and sacrifices made by veterans of Dakota County. These maps show the trail alignment and a close-up of the section of the trail containing the Schiela property, which is marked with a yellow star. The county has a Greenway Memorial Interpretive Plan, which includes the subject property as one of 3 major Greenway entry points, and as the proposed site for the Native American Veterans Memorial. The property is also adjacent to the City of Egan's Lakeside Park, which you can see on the map. This map shows a close-up of the 10.6 acre property shown in the green and purple parcels. The 3 acre section shown in purple contains part of the shallow lake that is an important feature of the city's Lakeside Park, which is adjacent to the east. The county proposes to convey the 3 acre parcel containing the lake to the City of Egan for more unified management of the lake and shoreline. In exchange, will retain a Greenway corridor easement on the northern portion of this parcel, which you can sort of see on the map by that little hashed out gray area. While this 3 acre parcel was appraised at only $16,000, the city has agreed to reduce assessments on the total property by over $80,000 in exchange for obtaining the 3 acre parcel, which is a significant cost savings to both the county and the KOF program. So this property was appraised at $672,000, and the sellers agreed to an amount that is 110% of that, $739,200. The total acquisition cost is $758,207. The total grant amount will be $568,655, and Dakota County, of course, will provide the 25% match of $189,552. Our rationale for recommendation is that this acquisition is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund, the Veterans Memorial Greenway Regional Trail Long Range Plan, formerly named the Rich Valley Greenway Regional Trail, And Dakota County is within its 1.7 million per fiscal year limit for the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund. So our recommendations are that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $568,655 from the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund to Dakota County to acquire a 10.62 acre parcel located at 4420 Dodd Road in Eagan for the Veterans Memorial Greenway Regional Trail, and allow the county to convey 3.2 acres of the property valued at $16,000 to the city of Eagan in exchange for a more efficient lake management approach, and to save $80,000 in assessments, to retain a Greenway corridor easement on approximately 0.14 acres of the conveyed property, and require a council agreement and restrictive covenant only on the easement portion of the conveyed property. And finally, authorize the executive director of community development to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the council. So with that, I'm happy to take questions, and Al Singer from Dakota County is here. And I know this one is a little complicated, so we can talk through it if you need to. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Questions from commissioners?
I do have a question. How do you partially sell a lake? Or how is that? I'm sure there is an explanation there.
Yes. We're not really selling the lake itself, it's just part of the parcel is the lake. And
Okay.
so the lake is, of course, the public waters, which is why the value of the parcel is only $16,000. So it's just really to manage that
Just
shoreline.
kind of like the shorter run. Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Yeah.
If you really want, it's way out of the scope of what we care about, but there are actually multiple different ways that property lines can interact with lakes, and you can go read up on that if you want sometime. Sometimes property lines end at the water body, and sometimes they go across into it, and it depends on basically how plats were drawn in the 1800s.
Oh.
So it
got it.
depends on which lake it is.
Actually explains a lot of questions that I have when people are, putting their piers on lakes and all that. Totally out of this conversation, sorry.
Yeah.
It's relevant.
Looks good.
We can chat over coffee about it sometime if you want, but it's real complicated and we don't have to care here. Cecily?
Well, I always get confused when they're renaming of things. So
Yeah.
the Rich Valley
Rich Valley.
Greenway Regional Trail has been rededicated as Veterans Memorial Greenway Regional Trail. But in the project description, it's Vermilion Highlands Greenway Regional Trail.
Where are you looking for
It's the
that?
first page of the grant application.
Oh,
Exhibit 3.
yes, I can address that, sorry, Sharon Commissioners.
Okay.
At the time of application, the name of this trail was not yet in our system because it was new.
Oh,
And so the applicant just picked one, and I thought I'd gone back and changed that, but I must not have made it into that PDF. So sorry for the confusion, the name wasn't available.
Oh, so like they have a drop down where they have to select and it wasn't an
Yes,
option.
that's correct.
That makes sense.
Good answer. I was like,
You just made it up.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, anything else? I mean, it has some funky lines, but the actual, like, what we're accomplishing seems reasonably straightforward, so. That all seems fine to me. Does anyone have any concerns, since we're not gonna do formal discussion on a motion? I feel fine with it, everybody does?
Yeah, I
So
think it's a
our,
great idea. Lot
our
of
conveyance to
connectivity.
our liaison seems all right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Seems all right.
yes, Emmett?
Chair, I just wanted to add that I did speak with Amanda Durr, our brand-new commissioner from District H, and she wanted to just express her excitement and support for this, because she's like, yeah, I know about this. So that was great. She's unfortunately homesick, so,
Yes.
along with everyone else.
Thank you, we did want to recognize that, because yes, it is in her district, so.
Yeah,
That's good.
thank you.
Okay, well, cool, then I'll be on that then. And she's not moving, so I'm guessing the next one's the same thing. Our next one up is the Rush Creek Regional Trail, another park acquisition opportunity fund grant for Three Rivers Park District, also Jessica.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Again, for the record, Jessica Lee, planner with Parks. This is the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund for Rush Creek Regional Trail, the Segal property for Three Rivers Park District, business item 2024-7. Rush Creek Regional Trail is located in the northern part of Hennepin County It currently starts at the Mississippi River at Mississippi Gateway Regional Park and travels west for 7 miles, ending at Elm Creek Park Reserve. An additional 11 miles is planned to connect Elm Creek to Crowhasset Park Reserve. The Segal property is located just west of Elm Creek in the city of Maple Grove, near the border of the city of Dayton. The 11-acre property includes 1 acre of developed land containing a home that will be removed, and 10 acres of undeveloped wooded land along Rush Creek. The undeveloped portion of the property is eligible for the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, and the property has been split to accommodate that use of funds. The developed portion of the property appraised at $300,000 and the undeveloped portion appraised at $655,000 for a total of $955,000, and the seller has agreed to that amount. The total acquisition cost is $1,068,200. The grant amount would be $801,150, and Three Rivers will pay the 25% local match of $267,050. A rationale for recommendation is that this acquisition is consistent with the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund, the Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, the Rush Creek Regional Trail Long Range Plan, and Three Rivers Park District is within its $1.7 million per fiscal year limit for the Parks and Trails Legacy Fund, and I should add Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund, Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund. So our recommendation is that the Metropolitan Council approve a grant of up to $801,150 from the Park Acquisition Opportunity Fund to Three Rivers Park District to acquire an 11.4 acre parcel located at 15406 Territorial Road in Maple Grove, Minnesota for the Rush Creek Regional Trail, and authorize the Executive Director of Community Development to execute the grant agreement and restrictive covenant on behalf of the Council. And with that, I'm happy to take questions, and I'll Heather from Three Rivers Park District in the audience.
All right, thank you. I should have flipped through this to find this ahead of time, but has that subdivision already been completed, or is that pending?
Yes, Chair and Commissioners, they have split the property, and they have legal descriptions for each part of the parcel.
Okay, so that's already approved by the city. Okay. For context for our new commissioners watching video, the deal there is that our different funding sources have different rules about what kind of land they can be used for. And sometimes we get a parcel that some areas of it fit some sets of rules and some areas that set a different set of rules. So what we're doing is legally splitting it into 2 different parcels, because then one can be acquired with one pot of money and one can be acquired with the other pot of money, just to make the most efficient use of our funds, because otherwise one would have to kind of waste funds buying the part that isn't the best fit for that funding source, because you have to go with whatever their minimum requirements are. So that's what's happening here. I wish we had a map of the subdivision to go with that explanation, but we don't need it. Cecily.
I gave you a preview of this question. It may not be applicable here, but I'm just kind of curious anyhow. Last paragraph on request for board action. So if the city does want to acquire this acreage at a future point in time, and if there is funding along with this, what happens to the money that's come from grants? Does that come back to Met Council?
Yeah, Chair and Commissioners, when Three Rivers proposed this to the board, and when they appraised it with the possibility of splitting off a part of the parcel for the city to acquire. They've decided not to do that, so they plan to maintain the entire parcel.
Oh, okay.
So they won't be selling it in the near future. That is just sometimes how they do business, to have it as an option.
Okay.
Okay. So that means we don't have to address this question now, but for Emmett's reference later, when I was talking to Cecily about this, I realized that I had suggested at a recent meeting that we should maybe in our Parks Policy Plan update do some more things to accommodate issues where you might want to acquire a whole parcel but then only use some of it for regional park purposes and sell off what you don't need. And I don't know if we currently have language that addresses what happens with the money of that if they receive grants through the Met Council for the acquisition. So that should be tacked on with that, to make sure we're addressing both of those parts. I talked about, yeah, we should do more acquiring like that because it's probably more efficient. But I hadn't thought about what do we do with the money.
Yeah, that's something that we could take up as a commission. Jessica and I can maybe put our heads together on that question and maybe come back for some guidance from the commission.
Yeah, so we don't need it on this since they're opting not to do it, but it's something for us to think about. Other questions?
I will just say I'm very excited for this trail. I really hope one day I can actually walk it. I know exactly where it is, and it changed so much from when you are in Mississippi Gateway and when you start going up. It's like going through different, parts of it. Even it's Maple Grove, but it's not Maple Grove. Everybody thinks of Maple Grove, so I think it's gonna be great. So yes. Mm-hmm.
Tony?
Yeah.
Chair, I had just one statement.
Okay.
And it was to Heather Kuika and the audience. It's like, this seems like a really unique and exciting trail, like one where we're actually acquiring natural areas, and it's a slow process. But I would love for the commissioners to get to tour it someday when it gets to a point where it would be valuable. Or so if you could just pass that on, that would be great.
So Rush Creek, or do you wanna know, Mississippi, or, because we have the West Mississippi Regional Trail that I've been buying a lot of property on.
We could do both, actually. We're really excited about that one too. That West Mississippi, we've seen a number of acquisitions recently. But this is one of those that I just have seen large parcels of wooded areas, and it just seems like it's gonna become a really unique part of our system.
Yeah, I'll absolutely pass it on to Jonathan and Kelly, and we'll see if we can set something up.
Thank
When
you.
it's a little bit warmer.
Yeah,
Sure.
We'll wait till summer.
We like tours.
Yeah, that's what I'm like, we gotta
Yeah.
read.
And we love showing off our product.
Yay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Everyone feeling pretty good about that?
Yes.
I am? Yeah? Okay. So that all seems fine as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
That will bring us on then to our final business item, which is the Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park Long Range Plan Amendment and Cedar Lake Regional Trail Long Range Plan Amendment for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. Go ahead, Colin.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. I am Colin Kelly, Planning Analyst, and I'm here to present the Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park and Cedar Lake Regional Trail Long Range Plan Amendments, also known as the Cedar Isles Plan for short, on behalf of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, or MPRB. I should note that just behind me, Emma Pachuta and Adam Arvidsson, both with MPRB, are here today and may respond to questions following this presentation as needed. I'd also like to mention that the photographs that appear throughout this presentation, including this one from Lake of the Isles, are drawn from the Cedar Isles Plan. Some geographic context. Minneapolis Chain of Lakes and Cedar Lake Regional Trail are centrally located in the regional park system in southwest Minneapolis. The plan amendments focus on the park spaces surrounding Cedar Lake, Lake of the Isles, and Dean Parkway, and a segment of the Cedar Lake Regional Trail. The figures you see here are figures 1, 2, and 3 in the staff report. MPRB outlined several target audiences who have been historically underrepresented in planning processes to engage during the Cedar Isles planning process, including cultural communities, seniors and elders, peoples with disabilities, renters, youth, and people who do not currently visit the Cedar Isles area. The plan acknowledges that Indigenous community members face barriers to access, and that a legacy of redlining and racial covenants have shaped access to the area. An Indigenous acknowledgement appears at the very beginning of the plan. Project staff sought paid services from institutions, nonprofits, and cultural organizations to design and implement engagement with specific audiences. Several themes emerged from these community collaborator engagements, including a desire for greater accessibility for people of all abilities and races, acknowledgement that there is a lack of diversity in the area, interest in elevating Indigenous legacy through education interpretation, concerns about safety, especially for people of color, and support for art, additional art and culture. The plan was transparent with whom MPRB was able to engage and who they struggled to involve. Because neighboring residents engaged strongly throughout the process, for example, it was often difficult for staff to adequately incorporate and support ideas from underrepresented voices in meetings, such as people of color or people who lived outside the adjacent communities. Following adoption of the plan, further community engagement will be completed as funds become available and projects are implemented. It will be important for outreach to continue to include a local and regional audience to ensure a diversity of participants and perspectives. Community engagement for the Cedar Isles Plan began in the winter of 2019 and continued through the 45-day comment period from January 23rd to March 10th, 2023. Throughout the process, MPRB aimed to engage as many stakeholder groups as possible to ensure the plan reflected a diversity of voices. The project team worked directly with stakeholders to ensure their perspectives were consistently understood, considered, and reflected in project decisions. Some of the public engagement themes from different phases of the planning process included support for elevating water quality within the plan, appreciation for the existing walking and biking network, appreciation for existing programming and amenities, interest in improving safety for pedestrians and bicyclists, support for and opposition to formalization of ad hoc forest trails near Cedar Lake, suggestion for a permanent restroom, and support for the preferred park concept. Partner engagement included both a technical advisory committee, or TAC, and a project advisory committee, or PAC. The TAC was made up of staff from different agencies and organizations that have a connection to the project area. The PAC was made up of MPRB staff representatives from departments across the organization. The plan for Cedar Lake and Lake of the Isles was approved by the MPRB Board of Commissioners on July 5th, 2023. This is attachment 1 in the staff report. During the planning process, 2 parcels of land were identified as future acquisition sites. A privately owned, vacant 0.27 acre lot adjacent to the Kenilworth Channel, and a 33.85 acre property known to many as the Remnant Lands, located to the northeast of Cedar Lake. This is figure 4 in the staff report. If acquired, the 0.27 acre parcel would complete a public pedestrian connection from Burnham Road Bridge to Cedar Lake along the north side of the channel. The plan proposes formalizing this public connection. The 33.85 acre parcel is currently an unmanaged forest area with minimal ad hoc trails and is owned by the Metropolitan Council. It was identified as a parcel for MPRB to acquire during the Metro Green Line extension planning process. The Cedar Isles plan formalizes this by proposing to acquire the parcel, maintaining the majority of the land as a natural area. Formal assessments have not been completed for either parcel at this time, and there is currently no timeline for acquisition of either parcel. Goals and recommendations in the Cedar Isles plan are divided into the following topics: water quality, natural resources, access and circulation, accessibility, safety, historic and cultural resources, and program and amenities. Here I'll focus on 2 of those areas: access and circulation and amenities and programming, and the elements most often discussed in the context of the development concept. Some of the access and circulation recommendations include formalizing ad hoc soft surface walking paths through the forest on the north, northeast, and east side of Cedar Lake, a new pedestrian trail along the Kenilworth Channel, widening walking and biking trails adjacent to Cedar Lake Parkway, widening trails along Dean Parkway to improve safety, and designing trails at an elevation above seasonal flood levels. Some of the amenities and programming recommendations include new docks, formalized water access points, viewing spots, picnic areas, and enhanced signage for Cedar Lake and Lake of the Isles. The plan also proposes a change from a portable to a permanent restroom at Cedar Lake East Beach and proposes to expand the number of restrooms near existing and proposed amenities at Lake of the Isles. In addition, The plan adds a few enhanced welcome entry points for Cedar Lake Regional Trail and Dean Parkway. Natural resources and water quality are an important focus of the Cedar Isles plan. From a natural resources perspective, the plan proposes enhancing natural areas and improving tree canopy in large swaths of existing forested areas. The plan also identifies areas where the existing prairie could be enhanced. For example, along South Upton Avenue and a large swath of the Cedar Lake Regional Trail. Enhanced prairie within the Cedar Lake Regional Trail corridor is one of the key initiatives and major investments proposed in the plan. Around Lake of the Isles, several lawn areas shift to other uses, including rain gardens and prairie and pollinator plantings to address water quality, flooding, and pollinator connectivity. Some of the park plan level goals for water quality include addressing stormwater runoff from all hard surfaces, reducing chloride, trash, sediment, and other pollutants from entering the lakes, and maintaining and stabilizing shoreline with native vegetation in all areas except for formal access points and identified view sheds. The Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park and Cedar Lake Regional Trail long-range plan amendments are consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, including Chapter 5, Strategy 1, and other council policies. The total estimated cost to implement the Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park and Cedar Lake Regional Trail long-range plan amendments is approximately $40 million to $58 million. The majority of the estimated cost is for water quality and natural resource improvements. Estimated costs are shown in Table 1 of the staff report. Of this total estimated cost, an estimated $2.3 million to $2.6 million is specific to the Cedar Lake Regional Trail Corridor. Attachment 2 of the staff report highlights the items that are specific to this regional trail. The estimated acquisition cost of $625,000 is the estimated market value for the just over a quarter acre parcel of vacant residential land. So, the proposed action before you then is that the Metropolitan Council approve the Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park Long Range Plan Amendment, approve the Cedar Lake Regional Trail Long Range Plan Amendment, require Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board to send preliminary plans to the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services Interceptor Engineering Assistant Manager prior to initiating any construction, and advise Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board to consider implementing the recommendations for solar resources and transportation in the advisory comments section of the business item. And with that, I will stand for your questions and remind you that MPRB staff is here as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, questions?
I know there were some questions about whether the trail was gonna be, like we got an email or something. I don't know if you're gonna talk about it, Tony, before I make a question.
I'm gonna bring it up if you didn't, but you can go ahead with yours first. Yeah.
Some kind of access around the trails were not gonna be, as they should be, or as some of the, public there think they should be. And I don't understand. If you can explain me more about that, that would be great. I have been around there. I know it's a very complicated area to work around. It's like very full of, urban houses, development, streets, everything is there pretty much. So I understand how hard and difficult it could be. So I'm excited about the project. I just wanna, see if there is anything that you can tell me about it.
Sure. Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if you wanted to share anything further.
Yeah, so she's referring to an email that all of the commissioners got back in September with some detailed concerns regarding parkland that is, I'm not sure of the extent of what the accessibility status is, but it's either possibly not even available to the public, or if it is, it's not developed in a way that makes it clear that it is or practical that it is, to be able to traverse the southeast shoreline of the lake, as well as part of the Kenilworth corridor. So we're wondering what's happening there with, it sounds like some private encroachments onto parkland. I know there are some practical difficulties with just the width of the property owned by the park board and what kind of hard amenities you could potentially put there, but also just the status of, can you even walk through that if you're not, with limited mobility, but also what the plan is for people who do need ADA type accommodations through there and what that looks like.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner, I would invite Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board staff to address this question if they are feeling up to the task.
Yes,
I
please.
think they would probably know best.
Come on up, Emma. Yeah, right to the table. You just identify yourself, sir, that was you.
This is like elevated.
He'll pick you up fine either way.
Hi Commissioners, my name is Emma Pachuta. I was one of the lead staff that worked on the Cedar Isles plan. Thank you for your question regarding the email that you received. I don't know if you can maybe scroll back to your acquisition map. Maybe that might be helpful just to refer. So the area that, that you're referring to is the southeastern portion between the Kenilworth Channel all the way down to Cedar Parkway. Yep, thank you. So that shoreline was discussed in great length during our planning process. We had a community advisory committee who ultimately made a recommendation to restore that shoreline to native habitat. But we did hear there was not consensus during the planning process. There were a number of different kind of topics that arose. A lot of folks felt strongly that they wanted that land to be returned back to the public. This is because currently there's a number of properties, I think there's 14 properties that abut the parkland, and a number of them have legal encroachments with the park board to have things like fences or docks and things like that. And so we did hear very clearly that people wanted to restore that land back to the public. I think what that looked like looked different to different people. So for some people, the shoreline restoration is restoring land back to the public. For others, other people wanted a soft surface pedestrian connection, and some people wanted a paved walking and biking trail. So again, this was discussed in length. There were some technical challenges, as was noted. The shoreline is as wide as, I think, 50 or 60 feet in some areas, but it's also as narrow as 7 feet in other areas. And so based on the technical challenges, as well as the focus on water quality with the public, again, the CAC recommended to restore that area to shoreline. And so what that means is that at the time that the park board has funding
address that concern, which is a bummer, but we do have that other places, and that's a thing that we deal with. Certainly for me though, anything that's designated as public parkland, I should be able to just go walk it if I'm capable of that kind of thing, and it makes me uncomfortable anytime that that's not true. So in terms of this perception, like I understand you don't have plans for a trail, but whether there's a trail or not, after restoration, it would be possible for someone to blaze their own, as long as it's not a particularly sensitive ecosystem or something. But what I might encourage you to consider is, if this is going to be the plan, put up some signage in the local area that explains what that plan is, saying, hey, this thing in front of you, if you're standing looking at the sign, that stuff there, it is in fact public land. We recognize that there are some issues. Here's our vision for it in the future, and maybe some mocked up pictures of what a restored shoreline could be, kind of thing. Just because it's important to recognize that it is public land if there's a perception that it's been de facto privatized, even if we aren't doing anything with it just yet. I think it's important for if somebody moves to the area and then 20 years down the line you're doing public engagement trying to talk about what to do with land in the area, that they would know, hey, that's supposed to be public land, I should go comment on what I want to do with it, not be like, oh, I'm only thinking about these other places because I'm assuming that's not part of the park. So perception is an important thing long term, and you can do things with signage and maps and stuff to make sure that that's communicated, even if what's on the ground isn't ideal yet. So I think that might go a long way Certainly people would prefer there be actual like trail-like access, but that can be a later thing. I just want to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up for another 30 years of like persisting the problem. We want to be on track for something that's going to improve it, both in fact and in perception. All right, Cecily, your concern?
Yeah, and I know for the Cedar Lake Regional Trail, it's just a long-range plan amendment, but it is a regional trail. And for people who live in other parts of the metro area, is there gonna be any parking? I mean, this is a very, very urbanized area, unlike these other trails we have on the agenda tonight. And I know it's really constrained down near Harriet and Biddy-Muckaska. But I don't know about, the Cedar Lake corridor. For people who don't live in the metro area, who don't bike, who don't have public transportation, there's none where I live in Washington County. So I would have to drive if I were to use this trail.
Thank you for that question. The conversation around parking specifically for the Cedar Lake Regional Trail didn't actually come up. So we did not add or remove any parking for any part of the plan. I haven't done an assessment of the parking in the area, so I don't know if I could fully speak to what is available in terms of access to the Cedar Lake Regional Trail. I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I assume a lot of what's in that corridor is residential or small business or whatever, but again, we're calling it a regional trail. If there aren't trailheads with parking areas, it will really only serve the Minneapolis community, people who can get there easily.
I haven't been there in a while, but it kind of remind me of Summit Avenue. Like you have some, specific places where they have a little more parking spot, and then the streets kind of diverge a little bit from the trail. It's a little up and down. It's
hit or miss.
Yes, and it's a weird area even to drive it around. So it's not like you can go around the lake like in the other two lakes down there. But I don't know if if you want that you could find a parking spot there.
Well, again, we kind of have a regional standard for.
Maybe there's no. She lives there. No.
Well, I grew up around these lakes
Yeah.
and have biked and done these trails, and that's actually one of the things that I like about these trails is that they're a little bit hidden. There is parking on kind of by some of those beaches around there, so you've got to bike or kind of do the walk around the lake in order to get to the trails. But there's always street parking, and so I think maybe talking about signage, if we're trying to really encourage people to come in because it's a regional park, maybe you put some funding towards, informing people about where to park, because it is a residential area. And they're really, from what I know of the area, I can't think of a place where you would be able to put a parking lot without kind of cutting down trees and, leveling out some areas, and that would feel like going in the wrong direction a little bit. But
I'm
I think
talking about the regional trail, not what's around the lakes.
you're
that's
talking
sort of
about
a-
Cedar Lake,
Yeah,
right?
this orange.
Yes, on
stretch.
right in that cove area, there's 2 parking lots, I think. You do have to walk up that side there. Yep, there's a parking lot right there, and I think
Okay.
there's actually 2.
Yeah.
And so you would have to walk up the trail to then, walk up the bike path or the walk path next to the lake and then get up onto the trail there. But I've also parked in those back, it's a little bit of a maze. So I think some signage or a little bit more information would be really effective and kind of getting across that this is, regional trails area. I would just like to comment on the shoreline that you're thinking. I go to Sunset Beach almost once a week every summer, and that area on the side there does feel very private, like it is private land. They've got docks out there. There's a little bit of shoreline, but you start to walk over there and you feel like, ugh, I feel like I'm going into somebody's yard. So I'm really excited because it's a beautiful lake, really, really pretty. It's the best place to watch the sunset, I think, and so I'm excited to see how you kind of recreate that natural shoreline and make more space there. I think it would benefit the community a lot that uses the lake. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Some of this is just a little awkward, and maybe it's a staff report thing, because we don't have the full actual plan, we have it sort of summarized.
Yeah.
And there's some things that this feels lighter than usual for a long-range plan thing, perhaps because we're treating it as an amendment, but it's an amendment to a very old plan from the 70s. And so like one of the things, another concern we heard besides the issue of, you know, the shoreline down on the southeast, was some about numbers of bathrooms and placements of bathrooms. And some of that is mentioned in here as there's planned to be some expansion of bathroom facilities and things like that. But I don't have any maps of like how many or where. And so I don't know if that concern is really being addressed or if there's still more to do on that kind of thing. Can you speak to that a bit without a graphic?
I can, and actually I brought a copy, so I'm gonna grab it and I can maybe show you the graphic.
That would be helpful.
And while we wait for just a moment, Chair, I'll just say that the plan was organized at a number of scales. So depending on the particular area of goal or recommendation, it might be at a watershed scale, a lake scale, or a park scale. And so when it came to some of the recommendations, they were for the entire area, the entire project area, including Cedar Lake, Lake of the Isles, Dean Parkway, and the portion of Cedar Lake Regional Trail. And then there were very specific recommendations for amenities at individual parts of Cedar Lake, Lake of the Isles, and other portions of this project area. So in the staff report, we didn't get into the level of detail of each specific location within the project area, but kept it at a higher level at the park level versus the individual zones at each particular location, if that makes sense.
Okay.
The plan goes into much greater detail.
If it's helpful, I can pass this visual over, but I'll kind of verbally explain this first. So with Cedar Lake, there are currently 3 portable restrooms at each of the 3 beaches. Oh, sorry, there's a portable restroom at Cedar Lake East Beach on the east side, at Cedar Point Beach on the west, and then there's the second kind of area of land. Should I point?
I think it's you.
Yeah.
I know you're talking about over here, is that right, or?
I could do it while you talk if you want.
I'm not the right man or wife.
Yeah.
So we've got 3 portable restrooms at these 3 locations and a permanent restroom at South Cedar Beach. What we did was we kept all the restrooms and we replaced the portable restrooms with a permanent restroom at East Cedar Lake Beach. This was mostly thought about because with the new light rail line that's coming, we anticipate we're gonna have more visitors. We had a lot of requests for another permanent restroom at this location.
Okay.
For Lake of the Isles, there is currently 1 portable restroom where Lake of the Isles connects to the lagoon in Bedamakaska. So we kept that one and we added 3 new restroom locations. 1 by the athletic fields over here, 1 up here by where the canoe racks are, and then 1 at the northern kind of tip of the lake. We heard quite a bit of feedback that there just wasn't sufficient bathroom access around Isles. So that's where we landed with that. And here's the visual.
Okay.
It's amenities and the keys on the other side of the sheet.
Any other comments or questions while I stare at this?
I just may add on Emma's behalf that there almost isn't a single thing in this plan that didn't have some robust community conversation and even sometimes controversy around it, including even the placement of portable restroom enclosures. So this number of restrooms is driven both by the community need and having them distributed throughout the park, but also what we could accomplish in the master plan over some oppositions, particularly by local residents who generally wanted no restroom expansion. Of course, they can go home to go to the restroom, and others cannot. So we felt like there needed to be some expansion, and the final determination of those numbers that Emma just described to you was again a years-long discussion process that was then finally adopted by our board. So, we can't say this many users per restroom. It's not based on that kind of math. It's based on a balancing that's driven primarily by community engagement.
Okay, and there was a similar kind of concern in terms of places to sit, benches along trails and picnic tables by picnic areas. And it sounds like there was not a lot of change in that regard as well.
Well, there were an addition of a number of new picnic locations. I think 2 new picnic areas at Lake of the Isles and 1 new picnic location at Cedar Lake. And I will note that the plan doesn't get into as much detail as locating where the benches are, but it does call for enhanced amenities, and so that we can interpret that as increased seating. I don't know if I framed that correctly. So it doesn't preclude new benches from being added at all. If anything, it actually supports the addition of new benches.
Sure.
I am a bit concerned with, as Colin mentioned in his intro, with the public engagement, it sounds like it was somewhat dominated by local residents. And there was a mention of, we need to do more later, but that's kind of open-ended. And so I'm wondering, you're talking about wanting to balance needs from different feedback that you got during the public engagement, but if we're also recognizing that the public engagement was a little bit lopsided, how confident are we that we're then finding that balance correctly? And especially concerning, both you want to give everybody some access to it, but if you're also talking from an equity perspective of acknowledging that some voices have had more say in the past to begin with, then you have to kind of overcorrect in the other direction, and we might be a long ways off from that potentially. So I'm wondering kind of what is the plan for how that additional public engagement and additional follow-up, like are we going to be seeing another amendment to this in a much shorter timeline than 50 years later, or what's happening from here to address that there may be more unheard voices still going into this?
I'll jump in here and feel free to add. I did want to just clarify one note around the engagement. I think Colin did a really nice job outlining our engagement piece. We spent about a year doing our initial engagement, and based on the fact that this was during our 2020 sort of COVID-19 happened, and so in 2021 we actually evaluated our first year of engagement, and we did determine that we didn't touch enough different voices, and so we actually extended our engagement 1 more year to give us more time to touch more voices and do more work broadening whose voices we heard from. So we did do a full other year to enhance that. I will note that I think Colin also touched on this, that all of the feedback that we gathered was often outside of our public meetings, our community advisory committee meetings. And so we did pass along very robust documents to our advisory committee, and they were really tasked with holding all of the different voices when they made their recommendations. I won't say it's a perfect system, and I wish that Minneapolis's demographics would be represented at our CAC meetings. Those CAC meetings are long 2 to 3 hour meetings in the evenings. On the weekdays, it doesn't always. Not everyone can make those types of meetings work in their schedule. But I will say that the engagement was done robustly and was passed on to our advisory committee. Whether that's the right system for our projects, I guess I don't know if I can totally speak to that.
Sure.
And Chair Russo, to clarify the comment about subsequent engagement, I should make this clear to the group that the park board's practice, by policy, is that, you know, we have created long-range plans for our entire system, both neighborhood and regional. And then when we implement projects, we re-engage around those specific capital projects. So at some point, you know, we're gonna say, we're gonna have, you know, a Metropolitan Council and State bond request, right? That you'll all see information on, and we're gonna wanna spend $2 million on something at Lake of the Isles. And then we will engage the community again to help us design and even prioritize what those improvements are gonna be out of the long-range plan that's being adopted today. We're not suggesting that we're gonna engage around the entirety of this plan again and then come back to you in a couple years to amend it. We do feel that this is the appropriate plan for our 20 to 30 year time horizon. I feel that Emma has done an extraordinary job in very difficult circumstances, including a pandemic and unrest and all of that, to deliver a plan that actually does balance those things. My commentary on the restrooms only was that if one group had had their say, there would be fewer, if any, restrooms, and maybe other people want a few more of them. And so we're trying to balance that engagement. And then as we implement things like new trail connections or shoreline improvements, like we will be in contact with the community again in a way that's appropriate under our policies to engage around that capital investment. And that won't rise to the level of coming back to MPOSC specifically for that project, as they typically don't. But as we use Parks and Trails funding and bond funding to implement these long-range plans, we will do that again based on community engagement at that time, not just, we don't just go away and then people wake up tomorrow and there's improvements done in the parks. We engage around our capital investment as well.
Tess, did you have something? Couldn't remember if I called on you since Emmett had told me your hand was up a long time ago. Yeah. I just want to recognize, I think I pick on you guys a little bit more than others in some respects because I have an ongoing thing in my mind of when we're talking about public engagement in a regional park concept, I want to make sure that we're engaging across the region, which is, you know, far flung sufficiently, not just whoever is right next to the facility. And that becomes more highlighted the more urbanized an area is. And as the most urbanized part of our system, Minneapolis is where that jumps out the most. So it is not specific to you, it just is the most obvious with you. So it's, and that's something where we probably need to talk about that more too. Like you got your CAC system and you got your other stuff. Like even our more rural areas, we don't necessarily do a good job of public engagement across implementing agency boundaries as a whole. So even just across neighborhood boundaries, we have probably room for improvement there. We've gotten a lot better in the last 5 years with public engagement processes and thinking about who to engage. But the like, where do we engage and how do we weight those different groups is probably something we want to keep in mind going into the next 5 years. Yes, Adam?
Chair Russo, if I may, you know, because you're hard on us, we try to be a model for.
And in a lot of ways, you're succeeding at that. You do have very robust plans for engagement. I'm just starting to nitpick on how can we improve them.
But you will be happy to hear that our community engagement policy specifically calls out that for regional park and trail plans, when we seat a CAC, half of its members must be drawn from areas outside of the immediate vicinity of the park area. And so this CAC was no exception. We even had a representative from St. Louis Park on our CAC. We had 2 from St. Louis Park and 1 from somewhere over northeast, and they came from a broader geography than simply right around these 2 lakes, and our policy requires us to operate that way.
That's good, yeah. Cecily?
Tony, thanks for mentioning that. Again, I'm not going to pile on you guys anymore, but just a question. You know, all of us commissioners are for a different region, and I'm pretty familiar with what's happening in Washington County. but I don't necessarily see the emails about what's happening in other areas. Maybe Met Council should be posting these public meetings or webinars somewhere on the website, just in case any of the public wanted to know what was happening. And they're not a resident of Minneapolis or may not work in Minneapolis, but want to learn more about what's happening regionally. I don't know how many takers you might get. You might get the bike clubs very engaged, or
That's certainly a possibility. I mean,
it's easy to post links
Yeah.
yeah.
and flyers.
I mean, certainly we can,
Public engagement pages or
And-
something
Yeah.
from agencies.
you have done a very good job of this, of mentioning when there's stuff going on in your district. But of course, that does have the limitation of if we only meet once a month, sometimes those updates are, we met 2
Right,
weeks ago,
right.
rather than communicating it to whoever might be watching before something happens. So that might be something we could look into. I don't know how much of an extra burden on staff that is to try to collect all of that information for every one of our units.
It's a
But
burden.
They're only 10.
you have like 50 staff or so, right?
Yes. We've actually looked into this for the programming side of things, like the idea that could we pull together a clearinghouse of like what's happening? And we looked at it and it's doable, and our research people tell us that it's doable, but it would be a bit of an investment in both time and technology.
And this came up before, I want to, possibly when we were talking about our system plan amendment, that maybe the council should have something that kind of describes to the average interested citizen of, if you want to have input on something, here's how and when you do, because frequently we get comments on things months after that comment would have been taken by the appropriate body. And we can probably do a better job of communicating that. Again, goes beyond this actual business item, but.
Right, just
I just want to say one more thing. Thank you for the work. Being that I go to Cedar Lake often in the summer and a lot of my friends meet up there, most of us don't live in that neighborhood. And I know that the community that really uses the lake frequently throughout the summer months are people who don't live in that area. And so I think having more information about this that was easy to access for people who aren't within the neighborhood would really benefit the work that you're doing, and then just also community engagement in a lot of ways. Because I don't think that that's going to change. It's such a beautiful, beautiful space. But that lake, more so than Lake of the Isles, I would say, is really a hangout spot for a lot of people and a place to enjoy the outdoors. So tricky.
Any other thoughts on this?
Good luck.
Yes. Endurance.
Yes.
So, and since we're not taking actual motion on this, see, is there anything you guys want to summarize for our conveyance of thoughts to Sue to bring to CDC? I mean, for me, I'm not necessarily opposed to any of what the actual plan is, but there are things that I'm nervous and cautious about to make sure that they get the attention they need. It's like some of what you were saying about coming back with future things for capital projects. Some of the concerns that we're looking at are things that might not have a whole project to them, so I wanted to make sure they are raised now because they might not come up in other respects. Maybe they will. But yeah, just for instance, like my comment about maybe having signage to convey what is public land, like that you're probably not going to come to us with a capital project to put up a $50 sign. But it could go a long way. So I think you're certainly aware of all the concerns. You're balancing them. I think we've addressed that they exist. And there's probably ongoing work to do, and certainly refer to our commissioner Tess in that area to keep us posted about anything that's happening on the ground.
Ooh, the pressure.
So, okay. Anything else? All right.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, and Sue, feel free to reach out to us if you have further questions or for clarifications too. Or to our staff from Minneapolis. All right, with that, we'll go on to an information item of the day, which is our 2050 Regional Development Guide and Regional Parks Policy Plan update. We have Emmett and Colin to talk about that as much as they can with half of us here.
If I could just start out, Chair and Commissioners, thank you for being here. We realize that it isn't ideal to do an information item with only half of our commission here. But I would like to just propose that one of our commissioners needs to leave at 5:45. And so how about if we just commit to not going beyond that point, so doing a 30-minute item, and if that's possible.
I don't know, I talk too much, sorry.
No, that's good.
Okay.
There goes the original author of the Cedar Lake Adams Plan, Al Singer, when he worked at the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. So I just wanted to note that.
I was telling those two, it brought back fond memories because I worked on that 30 years ago. And that issue on Southeast Cedar Lake was just the same. Just too much of a political challenge to be able to enforce the public nature of that privatization of the Southeast area. And so it's a truly unique place. I remember planting trees there. It's just a great place, and I'm still in contact with Keith Pressing at the Cedar Lake Park Association. It's very fond to me, so good work.
Thanks, Al. Excuse me. So if we could dive in for just a little dip of your input and intelligence here, that would be great. So Colin, I think you're going to kick us off, but we're committed to keeping it to 30 minutes if that works for you folks.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Emmett, and hello once again. It's me, Colin Kelly, Planning Analyst. I'm here with Emmett, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Regional Development Guide and the Regional Parks Policy Plan. We've got 3 parts of this presentation or discussion, this information item here before you. First, we'd like to share a proposal for early 2024 engagement with you and your colleagues in the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission on the interrelated topics of the Regional Development Guide and the Parks Policy Plan. Second, we'd like to share the schedule for finalizing the Regional Development Guide, which will happen later in this year and early next year, 2025. And finally, we'd like to hear from you on the topics we're about to dip into, our draft Regional Parks and Trails objectives, which we've talked a little bit about before. And we're looking for your advice on how we can achieve these objectives over the next 4 years. So I'll be covering the next couple of slides, and then I'll pass it over to Emmett. It may be that we want to entertain some of this discussion in a future meeting as well, or potentially sort of in between meetings, and that's something we can talk about as well. There might be other opportunities to engage on this topic, so a broader cross-section of this commission is able to participate. So let's go to part 1. Here is our proposed early 2024 Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission engagement plan. Essentially, this would be a series of information items leading up to the release of an early draft plan in May. So here we are in January. We've got several months before the tulips bloom in May. We've got some space we'd like to cover with you all in the Regional Parks Policy Plan and in other areas of interest. So what we'd like to do is spend a little bit of time talking about how we want to accomplish that and how we might organize the content of the Regional Parks Policy Plan going forward, because it may look a little bit different than how it looks today. One thing is fairly certain, we've alluded to this before, a standalone Regional Parks Policy Plan like the 130-page document we have today is not a likely outcome of this process. Integrating new parks objectives and a combination of new and existing parks policies and actions into the Regional Development Guide, however, is a likely outcome of this process. It is also possible that some of the existing plan content will move into a separate document akin to the Council's Local Planning Handbook, which provides critical guidance to local communities. Ours might be a Regional Parks and Trails Planning Handbook, providing critical guidance to regional park implementing agencies, especially. This is an evolving concept that we are just beginning to explore. We'll continue to keep you informed of any possible changes. That said, the existing policy plan serves as an excellent framework for the regional parks and trail system and the partnership between the council and the 10 regional park implementing agencies. It remains a critically important document. We will continue to use the existing plan as an important frame for existing conditions, regional goals, parks objectives, and especially the policy-focused chapters of the plan. It's also a way for us to ensure that we are comprehensively reviewing the entirety of the regional parks policy plan. As you'll see in each of the months and each of the meetings going forward here, we're proposing on touching on different aspects of the existing regional parks policy plan. So over those next few months, we'll provide some context on what's in the policy plan and focus on some emerging topics and priorities. As mentioned, today we intend to focus on priorities to achieve regional parks and trails objectives. Next month, a possible focus is climate adaptation and mitigation. In March, the ongoing operations and maintenance challenge. And in April, demographic changes and completing the system. These focus areas and their specific timing are subject to some change based on your input and that of the regional park implementing agencies, but these are some potential areas of focus based on existing conditions and challenges we face. And again, from one month to the next, we'll walk through the existing plan and share what we've learned through our conversations with you, implementing agency, council work groups, and other sources of inspiration, from council research to a variety of engagements. You may recall from our last meeting, Emmett suggested commission members could also play a deeper role in this process through off-cycle conversations in between our regularly scheduled meetings. This could take a variety of forms, but we encourage your continued involvement through the spring and beyond. Please reach out to one of us if you'd like to play a deeper role in this work. Okay, on to part 2. The schedule for finalizing the Regional Development Guide was recently updated, and we wanted to share that with you today. At the August 14th Metropolitan Council meeting, the Council will authorize the release of the Regional Development Guide for public comment, and a draft will be posted online the next day. This, of course, will include Regional Parks and Trails objectives, policies, and actions. 6 weeks later, on September 25th, a public hearing on the Regional Development Guide will occur at the Metropolitan Council meeting. On October 7th, the comment period closes. After that, final public comment reports will be prepared. On February 12th, 2025, the Council considers the adoption of the Regional Development Guide. As with our proposed engagement plan with you, this schedule is subject to some change, but this is the latest thinking. We will continue to keep you posted on these important deadlines. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Emmett for the third and arguably most exciting part of this information item.
Pressure's on. Great. Well, you've seen this slide before, so it's not too exciting. But this is, on the left, that graphic is the structure of the Regional Development Guide. So existing conditions, values and vision, goals and objectives, and then the distinct council systems, the land use policies, housing policies, parks policies, transportation, and water. So the big takeaway from this slide is that we're trying to do a better job of integrating our systems, the systems that we're responsible for under the roof of the Metropolitan Council. So that's a big goal. Next, I also think, as you'll see, so parks policies in the center of the bottom there, you know, this is where we're going to be spending most of our time as the Metropolitan Parks and Open Space Commission. But I do think that we're going to challenge ourselves to think about integration with whether it's a transportation or our wastewater system or you name it. On the right-hand column of this slide are the 5 cross-cutting goals. And you've seen these two. This is what the council developed and sort of endorsed as here are our working goals, that the region is equitable and inclusive, our communities are healthy and safe, the region is dynamic and resilient, we lead on addressing climate change, and finally, we protect and restore natural systems. You know, the big takeaway that I had from these work pretty well for us, you know, in terms of that large scale strategic look. I should go to the next slide. So here's, and this is a busy slide and I apologize, but we want you really to focus in the center here on the draft park objectives. Those 5 working goals that I just covered are along the top. The objectives, there's 4 of them currently, and then the existing parks policies. This is what exists today. So we're really looking at okay, if these are our draft parks objectives that really just sort of, there's a through line really from those working regional goals to the draft parks objectives. It just drops us into that regional parks and trails system. But we believe that as we think about those objectives, we might need to consider new policies, or we might need to, So how are we going to move this forward? That's the question. If we really are looking to develop this 21st century park system, what do we need to do to achieve these policies? Or excuse me, these objectives. So that's the challenge, because I think that there's some new challenges embedded in those. So I'm going to go to the next slide and then stop talking, I promise. Here is the questions that we wanted to leave with your input. So how do we achieve these objectives? And we're just throwing out over the next 4 years, because that's the plan horizon for the parks policy, that we have there's a legislative requirement that we have to update it at least every 4 years. So what are the priorities? We don't need to get lost in the nomenclature, but if we're going to really try to achieve these 4 objectives, what do we need to do, and what do we need to do differently? So here is my, I was hoping that the full commission would be here. I was really excited. We got some new commissioners, but, well, the world does not always work in the way that Emmett wants it to. So I was wondering if I could just ask Tess and Cecily to talk for a couple minutes about these big ideas. You know, so we're just going to do little, we called it pairing and sharing. So, and Tony and Monica, that you two talk for a little bit, and then we'll come back and just have a larger conversation about this. And I know we only have less than 20 minutes, so it's going to be great. So take about 3 to 5 minutes and just start. Because I thought it would be easier to start at that level and then take it to the full group. Tony, would you move over there?
Yeah.
Thanks.
And Emmett, the idea is to choose like an objective or
Yeah,
two?
just pick an objective or 2, knowing that we can't probably cover them all.
Okay.
Thanks, that's good.
Okay. Nice. See, I think that transportation can not
Adam, that was a good job.
I think, you see, out of this,
I think there was a
do we need new boxes down here or significant changes to the boxes down here? Or what does that look like?
Because it's better to connect people.
I feel like in all of these boxes are part of like this one is a huge part of it. Kind of like that, I think that's what he meant.
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
You're looking at that. Ellie, I just want to point out that we thank you for your commitment. It's the
Like I
finally
always
made
say,
it.
we need a way to
And we'll
hold
make
up
that
our
essentially be just
market
like one word
there.
change, and then that could make a huge difference.
Better engage with
So people know about our regional system.
because
And I don't think that's the existing one, but.
we don't have many controversial projects. When we do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I
Because you might-
So we're trying to keep this sort of accomplish.
You don't know what's going on.
Yeah, because like we don't,
Or if you know that
No,
there
and
is a
I-
part where it should be, because I don't know.
Right.
We do it in some bits, like when we're doing
Like
it.
I'm sure in recreation activities we
Yeah.
have.
For what I'm looking
Like, I got
And so I
3%
think
emails and all that.
And striving
The only
for
place that we actually have policy statements about communication, I think, is in the planning stage when we talk about public engagement.
That's my.
Oh, really?
I like that.
I don't know that we have anything that really says, when you do something, thou shalt communicate it. I mean, most of our implementing agencies do in some way, but we don't really provide them
Tell
any
them
guidance
to-
on how or when.
Which is
or-
kind of what you were saying, we should have a way that people know what's happening.
And also guidance to the council, like what we were just talking about before, is like what things should our own park staff do.
Yes.
Around the Cedar Lake.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
And
That could call out several things.
really
Good homework for them.
breaking it down to focusing
Yeah.
on,
I always like giving them homework. The tricky part is that sometimes they give me homework.
Oh, that's not good.
And then I go, what did I just get into?
Yes.
Yeah.
which I feel like we
Okay.
connect to equity as well.
Inexpensive.
Yes.
I certainly have some questions here on the meeting future needs
Like a
part.
generation of technology. but I
This is
think
where I get uncomfortable of
Yep.
what are our budget constraints long term? We've kind of been playing a little fast and loose with that all over the years. Like, okay, we're gonna put this giant number at the end of the cost to complete the system is $8 bajillion. And we haven't really addressed, is that realistic? And if it is, what's the timeline for it? We've just said it exists.
I've got a
And I would kind of like to see something else that comes back to this and says, all right, are we on track for something that's a plan or is this a dream?
Yes, that makes
And
sense.
if it's not feasible, how do we scale it back to something that is, so that when somebody is reading our plan, they can be reasonably confident that it's something that's going to happen. It might happen 50 years from now, but
that's
at least
forward.
would happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
And whether
Yes.
it's,
And I'm not sure
so yeah, so.
where that goes exactly. I mean, some of it is certainly finance, some of it is, the siting and acquisition. Like that's a bad headline for it, but this ultimately is the, what drives the system plan.
Yeah.
Because
Shouldn't be planned.
like the point I've raised before is we claim that everything's a regional asset that's gonna be used across the region. And when we do a long-range plan for an individual unit, they give some sort of a forecast of use. But we have never verified actual use against those forecasts. So like if I make a new park and I come say, hey, I want this added to the regional system, and say, okay, cool. And then 20 years from now, I find out that I have not once gotten a visitor from outside of the political agency that runs the park.
As well.
Should
in
that
a
still be
way that
regional dollars? Probably not.
kind of
Yeah, no, I didn't want to say anything, but having somebody from San Luis Park is not that far.
Right, well,
No.
so, and that is another point that I wanna bring into, okay.
Yes.
So I'm gonna write down my thing
Yes.
of,
Past
what am I gonna call this?
couple acquisitions and been really exciting to
Oh.
see this
Well,
really.
feasibility and
potential to
sustainability
add to natural
of the
spaces. It just
system.
feels
Not
so-
like we talk about sustainability of natural resources and things,
But
but
the
not of
system needs
also
to,
like
the
yeah.
political.
Good.
Well, you know, if they don't.
And it needs to be part of it, otherwise, what are we doing?
Parks may never
Yeah.
reach their full potential.
Which is always an awkward conversation, because what I'm ultimately talking about is possibly removing things that people like,
Somebody contacted.
which is not popular, it
Yeah,
wasn't,
right, there
but
was- there are some.
somebody has to be the jerk that raises the hard questions, and otherwise we'll be a chair, right?
You know, it's a waiting game.
I'm frequently the guy at work that asks questions in meetings, but
you
people go, why'd you ask for that?
You have to make the questions.
Really fortunate.
We didn't want to address.
And it's
Yeah, so
area
there's a
that
piece about like St. Louis Park.
really
In our
passionate
public
about
engagement,
the outdoors,
I don't
and
know
so
what our policy actually says about this,
I'm
actually.
glad that
I
this
should
is
call
an
you.
aspect of it too.
But
because
we
I feel
don't
like it's really
engage
important
well
to open up the
across
conversation.
highways. Like there's, St. Louis Park is.
If we could take 2 more minutes and then just
Cedar
return to
and
the
the
photos.
Isles,
You know,
but it's
this
not
And the
marine
second
Yeah.
or
inclusion
Jasca.
can also lead to.
And if you're doing planning, like,
It's not even Brooklyn, but it doesn't really cross to another
yeah,
page.
like that basically never happens.
Yeah.
Because people aren't on those mailing lists, they aren't on those Facebook pages, they aren't looking at it. So you're gonna have to do some
significantly more proactive outreach to get any involvement, but we should have some. It's like, I don't know what the standard is gonna be for how much, but I would like to see some.
Some, yes.
And we have had some that did, like,
Sure, I could drive along.
we talked about this in the concept of the Summit Avenue one, where people were talking about what is the balance of local input versus farther away. We actually did have some that was farther away, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. It wasn't a huge amount, but there was some.
Ideally free.
Yes.
It'd be good to measure that and call that out.
Well, and it's just like
That would
that
go
area
into the-
too,
And I think that
tricky to like find.
that addresses, you know, it's an equity-ish kind of thing, but it's also a future needs thing of, you know, this is the needs of the region, and we're saying that these are supposed to serve regional users, it's limiting that.
Just because I think it's
agree.
people
Find
question.
the direction.
Because you're also just checking
Yeah.
Access easily.
Yeah, like we've talked a lot about equity in terms of
This specific project.
demographics and user groups, but not as much in terms of
This was
geography.
It is, and they have a lot
They're
of
out of sync
influence.
with
It's
the
also
That's probably upsetting them because
No,
I don't.
If we could return to the large group, that would be amazing.
Other things.
Oh, now you can't. 30 more seconds.
It also requires
30 more seconds, you got it.
people outside of their voter demographic,
Um,
which is
Yeah, I get
What's
that.
that?
like, how much can you require them to care about that?
It's okay.
Bummer. Yeah.
For me. Thanks, everybody. That was great. I saw there was some conversation, that's exactly. So I don't want to talk too much, but the questions were sort of, what do we need to do in order to achieve these big things? And what are your thoughts? Who wants to go first? We've got 10 minutes.
I think ask them first, because I can talk as much as I want.
We had a great conversation, and we, I believe, had ideas that would add to the park objectives. We're not proposing a fifth or eliminating one. For example, for equity, and we didn't wordsmith this. It's great the way it's written, but I believe what's missing is the regional community engagement piece. Because this is talking about connecting people with what's there in the parks, but not asking them and engaging them about what they want. And based on some of our master plans recently, like Summit Avenue, you know, there's no real model of what great regional community engagement is in our conversation tonight. And again, not putting a metrics on, but really saying that part of our goal, part of our role is asking people what they want.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that could be thrown in the equity one.
Sure.
And then on infrastructure, again, another great objective, but again, based on recent items we've seen, we would suggest adding something along the lines of, you know, having information about this park and trail infrastructure, whether it's signage or stuff on the website, just so people know how to use these things. Did I catch that right?
Yes.
Thank you, Cecily. Tess, anything you want to add?
No, I just, those were the things, and well, with the signage and things like that, building that really solid infrastructure will lead to equity and inclusion in a lot of ways too, for making it easy for people to access things without feeling intimidated by, like, I don't know where to go, or that kind of thing, so.
Yeah, good point. And what I was trying to say is that we really feel that too, that how the interconnected nature, that these aren't like distinct objectives, like there's a lot of interaction between them, so good.
And I think with what you had said about engagement, even just that one word switch also moves to meeting of future needs too, in terms of engaging people to find out what they need now and what will really benefit them and their families and community in the future around the work that we're doing here.
Thank you.
We had a lot of overlap with some of those, but some of it said maybe a little bit differently. It's like when you're talking about communicating about infrastructure. And then earlier, we talked about possibly communicating better about planning and process stuff. We kind of wrap those together into, maybe we need an actual policy about communication and marketing. That would, some of it would be kind of best practices, recommendations that our IAs could use to learn from each other, where a lot of that's happening already in the meetings that you have outside of this commission, but maybe we could write down some of what we've learned from that over the last several years. But also some of it would be direction to staff, like what we just said of, hey, maybe we can get you guys to put up stuff calling out on the council website about any sort of public engagement things that are happening across the region. If we really want to make you do that, that could be something that we call out in policy. And so
Colin will take it on.
yeah, taking a holistic view of what are all of the things that we could communicate better, both from the commission to the staff and the staff to the public and from our IAs to the public, in terms of both planning our projects and what the results of those were. What have we actually built? What's on the ground? What can you do? Maybe we could have an entire section somewhere that gets into that. It's probably not something that we're going to have fully drafted out this time around on this timeline, but if we get something in place, it might get us set up a little bit better for the 4-year revision.
Yeah.
To come back and be like, okay, that's not quite what we meant, put this in there. But we've talked about communication and marketing and things for years and years and years, but we've never really written anything down. Maybe this is where we start.
I just wanted to grab onto that and say, I love the idea of setting expectations that we need to figure out as we move into the future, because I think that's a little more realistic. Because like, honestly, this timeline kind of frightens me because there's so much, there's the depth of these conversations is kind of, obvious. And so if we can set up where we need to go as a commission for the next several years, I love that idea.
Yeah, and that was also a thought I had as you're going through. I was realizing that there's so much of what we've been talking about so far has been focused on the regional development guide and the goals that come out of that. And there's a bunch of things in my head that are like disconnected from the regional development guide. They're just things that we need to tweak about our policy anyway. And if we didn't have the development guide at all, we could have spent the last year and a half on it. But since we've had that, it's like, well, that kind of kicks it down to the next one. And okay, so also, we talked about both addressing an equity and a future needs one. In terms of our public engagement, what I just said, doing a better job of having that be really regional for things. I think several years ago we told the implementing agencies, hey, we want to see some improvements to how we do public engagement. And they did. They've changed a whole bunch of things about how they do public engagement, but those changes have still mostly been within their jurisdictional boundaries. They do a much better job of engaging within their agency. And we want to see some way, okay, now that we've improved that to the point where we can nitpick a little, how do we do better engagement across those boundaries, getting beyond your political bubble and out to the full set of user base that we're going to be serving? What does that look like? And that, again, is probably only going to be a starting point for now, because recognizing we want to do this, we don't really know what we want you to do, but we want to do something that sets us up again for later.
Thank you.
And then I'm going to call out my, as I recognize, uncomfortable thing of we want to talk about the feasibility and sustainability of the overall system in terms of size and funding and usage and what that looks like. I want to say, I want something where if we publish a plan, whether it's the parks policy plan and its overall siting and mission and goals, as well as all of the individual unit long-term plans, if somebody went and read all of them, I want them to be able to feel confident that a plan means that that's something that's actually going to happen. It may not happen in any time sort of short time frame. We have a lot of plans that are 30, 40, 50 years out, but I want them to actually be happening and not putting things down that are just complete pipe dreams, right? So I would like to see a few things to come back. It's like, hey, with the amount of money that we actually foresee over the next 50 years, are we actually going to be able to do the things that we're claiming we're going to be able to do? And what does that look like? And part of that is comparing the cost to complete the systems things against what our actual funding sources are and saying, how much of this does it get done every decade and what's our time frame? Is this something where we anticipate being able to complete it in 30 years or something that would take 300 years? And being honest about what that looks like. And if we need changes to funding sources, how would we ask for them? Or if we can't get increased funding, how would we scale back what we're aiming to do and how would we prioritize that? And that also ties into something that I brought up before of when we have things that have been designated as regional, we don't currently have a way of validating whether they're actually getting regional use or only local use. We had the forecasts in their initial long-range plan, but our granularity of visitor counts don't check whether that's actually happening. And I don't think we have anything in policy saying of what exactly the expectation is and how we measure it. And I think we probably should. It's going to be an awkward and uncomfortable piece, but looking into, can we actually build all this stuff? What can we fund? And if not everything, what do we potentially scale back on? So I think those were three. Anything I missed, Monica?
No, that was enough homework.
Well, we're right at time. That was actually amazing that we got that much in this short of time. So thank you. We want to do more things like this where we just ask kind of open-ended questions and then let you folks riff. Colin and I will be bringing what we learned today back to you soon. I don't know exactly when, but in the next month or two where we're definitely going to be reworking these objectives. And we want to get into like thinking about like policy areas. Tony, I really appreciated what you said that like we're going to be setting up expectations that we're going to just have to flesh out over the coming years. That's good, like a policy around communications, like we can do that. I like that, but it probably won't be that good initially. I want to be sensitive to the fact that Cecily's got to go. Can I just ask a really, I don't mean to put anyone on the spot, but we have an equity grant program. We extended the deadline by a month, as you learned last month. It will close on January 15th. And we want a committee that will make decisions as to what projects to fund. And we would love it if we could get some members here. I think there was I was thinking that Monica, you said you'd be willing to do it. Mm-hmm. Cecily, I couldn't remember if you said you would do it.
Well, I have done it, so,
yeah.
If
others want to do it, Tess, if you would be interested in doing it, we would. It's a 2-meeting commitment. The first one's a virtual one, the second one is in person. And then Tony, I was wondering about you too.
Sure.
So.
Yeah.
You're in?
I'm in.
Okay, and Cecily, there's room for you up to 4 if you want, otherwise 3 is awesome.
I'm gone for a month, I'm gone.
Okay, that's great.
January 10th
Three
through February
is
7th.
Above and beyond, and there will be 3 CDC members, including our liaison, Councilmember Vento, so that's great. We do have a couple additional reports if you guys want to hear them, otherwise I could put them in an email, whatever you prefer, knowing that Cecily, you probably got to take off.
Sure. I mean, I think it'd probably be good to put them in an email anyway because we have so many people that aren't here.
Yep.
But yeah, look at that. Does that wrap up this item then?
That wraps this item. Thank you very much. That was excellent.
Thank you. So that will bring us to whatever reports we are going to cover. I just want to recognize, yes, we do have 2 new appointees, Amanda Duer and Chris Surig. I hope I'm pronouncing those correctly, for H&E, who had other things going on today, but we should see them next month. We do still have 1 vacancy that maybe Emmett can speak to. And I want to recognize and thank outgoing Commissioner Kiana Yang.
Awesome.
We had the really unfortunate thing of 2 incumbent commissioners being drawn in together in redistricting, so it was not possible to keep both of them. So we have Tess, but we are unfortunately losing Kiana because of that, not because of her actually wanting to depart from us. So thank you very much for that. If you watch this later, hopefully we'll see you again in some other park-related context someday. Any other commissioner reports? Anything from staff for now?
I will get back to you in an email about future opportunities to get deeper engagement with you off cycle. Some of it might be like commissioner interviews or surveys or like virtual discussions of no quorum, so 4 people or less. So we will be in touch with that, and probably starting in February, we'll start those opportunities. Tony pointed out to me, I'm just kidding, the term end dates that I was wrong. I flipped the 2 things. So our chair and districts A through D end in the first Monday in January 2027, and then E through H, it's the first Monday in January in 2025. So I have to redo the council motion that we passed, last month. I will do that. It'll happen like that. So I apologize for the lack of clarity, but I'll send that information out. I wanted people to know that we are being recommended for $3 million in Environment and Natural Resources Trust Fund dollars. That's marching through the legislature right now, and that is very much thanks to the good work of Jessica Lee, who was here earlier. As Cecily pointed out last meeting, I'm so glad that she's staying with the council. But so that's super exciting. I want to set up a time with our new commissioners, Amanda Durr and Chris Surig. I was wondering, Tony, if you'd want to join that, and if any other commissioners wanted to join an orientation conversation, it could be sharing your experience or highlights. But I'm going to set that up virtually 1 hour for later this month. So if anyone's interested, let me know.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, cool. Thank you, everyone, for today.
Okay, cool. That will adjourn for now. Talk more next month.